All right, good morning, good morning. Firstly, thank you all so much for being here. And I just want a quick show of hands. Who are ECS and or lower school parents? Okay. I just want to make sure I know which kids to give all the donuts to just before pickup line. Unless you eat them all, okay? So eat them all before you leave or your kids are going home sugared up. All right. For those of you that I haven't met, Gary Sullivan, head of school at PA, been here now 3.5, almost 4 months. Thank you so much for supporting these events. These are fantastic. I want to thank Sarah and our counselling department in general for putting this on. And there'll be many more events like this. Parent education is a part of what we do at PA as well, because we're all in this together. It takes a village. And none of you are here because you are under pressure as parents, obviously. But thank you so much to our speakers too. Look forward to hearing what you have to say. And again, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Gary. Good morning. We're so glad to have our first of our counseling, Coffee with the Counselor events for the school year. I'm Sarah Gorman, the head of counseling here at PA, and I work in the upper school. Ready today to engage in this vital conversation about something that's so, ever present in our lives and getting the attention that I think it really deserves. The fact that we're stressed, the fact that we need to learn and build those strategies to give ourselves compassion and grace. So before we begin, I want to acknowledge the incredible team that we have in our counseling department. Early childhood and lower school counselor Jenna Duty, middle school counselor Corbin Bach, and 9th and 10th grade counselor in the upper school with me, Susan Kohler. And we also have a number of our administrative and teaching faculty with us today, so we definitely welcome everyone. Today's discussion aims to remind us that while parenting can be demanding, it's essential to give ourselves grace. And we see this image here. In August 2024, U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy released an advisory highlighting the urgent need to support the mental health and well-being of parents. And according to data that they collected that informed this advisory, 33% of parents report high levels of stress in the past month compared to 20% of other adults. 48% of parents say that most days their stress is completely overwhelming compared to 26% among other adults. And looking at those numbers and just knowing what we all deal with on a daily basis, Marty and I were talking, it's kind of surprising those numbers aren't higher because we know what our world pushes on us and what we have to deal with. So the advisory from the Surgeon General underscores that the significant stressors faced by parents can and do adversely impact our mental health and consequently the health of our children. It emphasizes the importance of self-compassion and accessible mental health resources while advocating for public policies that prioritize family well-being. So this is why we're here, to explore these themes further and provide strategies for practicing self-compassion in our parenting journeys. And I'm not here to tell you all that, so I need to quit talking and welcome our experts, Marty Skrivanos and Janelle Von Storch. So welcome to both of them. So let's start. If the two of you could share just a bit about your backgrounds and early perspectives on what has brought us here today.
Well, good morning. My name is Janelle Von Storch, and I am the coordinator of community outreach and clinical education at Arkansas Families First in North Little Rock. I've also had the privilege of working with Marty at Compass Counseling for over 12 years. So I'm a licensed professional counselor. Have spent the majority of my life here in West Little Rock, and it is very good to be here. I'm also really excited about this topic because we don't talk enough about parental stress, recognizing it, supporting you all, and doing something about it. So I'm really grateful, Sarah, that PA tackles these topics.
Yeah, and my name is Marty, and like you said, I also am a licensed professional counselor. I'm the owner and clinical director at Compass Family Counseling, and super excited to be here. It is one of those things where Yeah, we tend not to talk a whole lot about this, but let's not kid ourselves. Every one of us is stressed out on a day-to-day basis. The word overwhelmed that the Surgeon General put out there is probably a word we're going to hit on here in a few minutes with some things. But super excited that you guys are here. We're going to ask some questions, process through some things, and see if we can't help ourselves, pace ourselves, and slow down just a little bit. So,
All right, thank you so much. Let's start generally. Can you define self-compassion and explain its importance, particularly for stressed parents?
well, so I think in our world we would tend to call that self-care. And at the end of the day, really what we're looking at there is where's an appropriate balance for you in your day-to-day? Look, we all have things that we have on our plates that are kind of non-negotiables, right? There are things we have to do day in and day out. But then there's also times during that day where there isn't something that's mandated. But if we get out of whack with all the stresses and pressures, we're not going to slow down to take care of it. So at the end of the day, self-care, self-compassion, to me is kind of the slowing down, pacing yourself and figuring out, what do I need to do today to rest, to recharge, so that I can be the best version of myself for whatever those things are that really are calling day to day that I don't have the opportunity to just not do.
I love that definition, Marty. When I think about compassion and compassion for self, I think there's a step before that, and that step is acceptance. Oftentimes we aim high for positive things, but we need to stop and pause and understand that there are feelings, thoughts, and experiences that aren't so pleasant. And these are very important and critical to our understanding situations. So if we can pause and take note and recognize those feelings and give them credence, we're at a place to be mindful, to be able to take care of ourselves. It's not just pace of life, even though pace of life is really important. Another thing we need to really kind of be mindful of is that we all have a point of saturation that we can meet, and there can be a loss of bandwidth. So we can have nothing going on and still reach that point of saturation. So if we can pause, be aware of what's going on inside of us, and take steps to create that bandwidth within our lives, we'll be in a much better place to care for our children.
And I think with that, the phrase of or word of acceptance is that awareness.
Yes.
Being aware of what we're feeling and why we're feeling it. How does the U.S. Surgeon General's advisory on the mental health and well-being of parents resonate with your experience as counselors, what you're seeing on the day-to-day with families and adults?
Sarah, I didn't know that this mandate was out until you sent it. And when I read it, I was just it spoke to me. Working with parents every day, there's just so much stress. I think it's important. There are communication and conversations going on a national level about what to do about the stressors that parents feel. I am in a national consultation group that works with children from birth to 5 years old, and it's really interesting to me. We have earmarked 2020 as a critical year in terms of pandemic, and then we've earmarked the year 2038. Because in 2038, when we're doing therapy and we're doing intakes and we're trying to figure out what children are facing, we want to stop and think about what was going on in their early years and what their parents are experiencing back in pandemic, and see how it's impacted how they deal with people, what their social skills are like, their ability to cope adaptively. And so I think it's real important to stop and think about how we're doing as parents. How we're, the culture we live in. I don't know if influencers are still a thing, but are we trying to live up to what social media tells us we should be, or what our kids should be? And how are we managing that and filtering that? Parents face more stress today than in any other time I've ever known. So I'm grateful that the Surgeon General is taking some time to really address it.
Yeah, and I think it was interesting too, like I said, we were talking about it, it almost seems a little bit low, but I think that just goes to show and how much we really are dealing with. and the fact that the Surgeon General is actually making it a priority now is something of importance. So if we're being very honest, the last 4 years have been totally flipped upside down in everything we once knew. I mean, we've been doing this a while, and we live in Little Rock. We're in the heart of the South, the Bible Belt. 5 years ago, therapy was somewhat taboo. You may have a counselor or a therapist, but you're not telling anybody about it. It's going to be something that's very private, very quiet. Everything 4.5 years ago flipped upside down. The Band-Aid got ripped off. The floodgates opened. And now I think all of us are realizing everything I once thought I was controlling, I don't really control anymore. All of those things that maybe I had tamped down have now boiled over and boiled to the surface, and we've got to deal with it. And I think in that, the warning is there, and we need to pay attention to it, the awareness, the slowing down enough to recognize what are those things that are impacting our day? How are they affecting me throughout the day? Using your word bandwidth from earlier. It's the word bandwidth, it's the word capacity. We all have a max, and once we're there, we're there. So to even bring this out is one of those, it's been funny to watch. Like, now you see, go back 4 years, Simone Biles and the whole gymnastics thing. She was the first one publicly to kind of say the whole thing about, man, I need some help. And since then, we're seeing more and more. We were talking about this Susan a minute ago. I was up in Fayetteville for one of my kids' bid day things, and some boys that I had the privilege of working with through their high school years found me on campus, came and hung out and sat down for 20 minutes. And people are like, what is happening? Like, they don't care anymore. They're not trying to hide it. They recognize there are issues, we need help, so we've got to work on it. So that's a fun thing that we're getting to see as it moves forward is, hey, this stuff is real and we better be prepped for it and deal with it.
Let's
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go.
Can we ask? I'd love to ask you all, do you all feel stressed? And what kind of things stress you out as a parent? What's on your plate?
Chemistry.
Yes. I feel that.
We take on, that's a good point. We take on the stresses of our children.
Yeah.
100%. And we carry them heavy.
What else? What else is on your plate as parents?
I think it's hard too. I was just thinking, distracted, that I haven't taught my kid to ride a bike yet. And she's 7 and I'm like so embarrassed that I haven't. I was like, oh, I gotta take her to the park. We have a great place outside of our house. Like, you know, we do a lot together, but I think the pressure on us to do so much with our kids all the time, like, I don't know when to do that. Like, I don't know when to put the bike in the car and take her, and then we're working and we're doing all these things, and then just, you know, whatever the list is that I've made up in my head.
You're my sister. Yeah. My daughter's 14, and she never learned to ride a bike. She was just cast in a film, and we're reading the script, and it says her character rides her bike, and we're like, oh! She taught herself in 2 days, but I feel you. That's a pressure. Yes, sir.
I would say time management for our household, because we've got a 17-year-old son and a 7-year-old daughter. We thought it'd be easier to space them out 10 years, but actually, they don't have anything in common. And they can be 2 different places simultaneously, and my wife's usually in clinic. So it all falls on me, my son, who's driving, but oftentimes is grounded. So all of a sudden, I'm logistically trying to Uber both of them all over town. So if you see me speeding, forgive me.
Yeah, oh my goodness. And over here, was someone going to say something at this table?
Well, I agree with her, because now, I would say that, like for my parents or grandparents, it was like, okay, food, clothes, and shelter, but now we're trying to work out the emotional being, you know, making sure like they do outside, they learn these different social things, so that, and then I'm free, so this is good. So, and you know, just have like, I do feel tired sometimes, feeling like, okay, she does need to go outside and say, Mom, can I do this? So, trying to make sure I balance it out, but then seeing like, okay, I'm tired, I'm going to have all this. So, kind of that thing, just balancing, just trying to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, are you still working? Like, do I have a choice?
Right, because some of us don't have a choice, right? And I'm just curious, still feel the pressure to make sure your kids start early enough to have the right opportunities. Like gymnastics starts at 2, right? The extra cheerleading or soccer and making sure the clinics are there. That's a lot of time-intensive stuff just to make sure they have a foundation to grow. There's a lot on our plates. Sorry, Sarah, I just wanted to
That
ask.
was perfect. And it kind of reminds me too of what we as counselors say to our kids when they come into us stressed, and they feel like they're the only one who doesn't have it together, and everyone else is, going right along and they have it all worked out. And I think what we as parents would be so important for us to recognize is that we're not the only one dealing with this. And going back to Marty, what you said about being open about it and verbalizing and saying, hey, I'm struggling right now, and having that dialogue would be so key for all of us, right? So kind of piggybacking on that, a lot of times we feel guilty about taking time for ourselves, right? So how can we overcome this stigma and prioritize our well-being so that we can do the things that we need to do as parents for our kids?
I think that's a great question. In picking up on what you said about teaching your daughter to ride a bike at age 7. Part of what you hear in there, at least what I start to hear, is, okay, there's a little bit of mom guilt going on. Like, she should have already done this, and why haven't we done this? So there's no possible way you're ever going to give yourself permission to put your feet up for half an hour when, oh no, she doesn't know how to ride a bike, I got to go do that first. The problem with that is the exact thing we get caught up in. If I don't rest, if I'm not aware enough of the time management and all the things pulling at me, I'm going to run so frantically through the day that I'm not going to have the capacity or the bandwidth to go and teach them how to ride a bike. Speaking for me, if I'm you in that, what's going to happen is we're going to load up, we're going to go out to the park, I'm going to put them on the bike, push them, they're going to fall. I'm like, oh, this sucks, it's never going to work, and I'm going to put them back in the car, we're going to go home because it's not going to happen. It's just going to be stressful, frustrating, and we've got to slow down. Because what I do know is when we talk that word overwhelmed, you hear it as you're talking time management. Generally speaking, when we are overwhelmed, we go one of 2 directions. We either lock up and freeze and kind of say, I can't do, I'm done, forget it, game over, kind of withdraw. But every one of us in here knows life doesn't stop just because I do that. Things will keep piling up. So that doesn't tend to work. The other is we kind of try to then push and push and push to get way out in front of it to get caught up. The problem with that one is we expend so much extra energy to get caught up or get ahead that once we do, we crash. We find ourselves right back in there. So it's essential as parents that we figure out what's our pace and rhythm that's truly sustainable. And everyone's different. One of my best friends in the world sleeps 4 hours a night. No idea how he does that. He's done it for the 35 years I've known him. You go less than 7 for me and you don't want to be around me the next day. But in there then, here's what's interesting. He's learned how to pace himself at that rate. I've learned how to pace myself at a different one. And so the awareness of what's pulling, the ability to slow down and go, you know what? What do I need to prioritize? What do I need to pace myself in? Because as parents, like you were saying, I didn't know about the 2020 to 2038. We get them for 18 years, maybe a little longer. That's a lot of time that we're going to be required to be available, be engaged, take care of, parent, love well, lead, launch out. So if we're not aware of that and we're not doing it, we're going to be in a lot of trouble because we're going to be out of gas by the time they're 7. And there's a whole lot of life left. So that's one of those, I think it's essential that we as parents figure out, and it may simply be 5 minutes out of a day, closing the bedroom door, putting a song on and just sitting there and going, no one's bothering me. It may be that you have the opportunity to go for a 30-minute walk a couple of times a week. Things like that are essential. We've got to be aware of it and then practice it somewhat.
Oh, absolutely agree. And I'll go further to say we can't afford not to take time to pay attention to ourselves. It's not just what can we do for self-care like it's fluff. It's vital that we put margins in our lives and buffers. Because well, you've heard the term, we can't pour from an empty cup. You can't give what you don't have. And when we hit zero, we tend to co-escalate with our kids instead of helping them regulate. So it's not selfish. It's not crazy. I know there was a minor tiff at our house last week because we've been going 90 to nothing, and we made the decision that we weren't going out. We weren't going to fill every minute of a weekend. So teaching your kids how to deal with boredom and not entertaining them, making family time to just breathe and do nothing is as vital a lesson as teaching them how to manage their time and how to take care of tasks. So I would say that slowing down is a necessity. And self-care isn't just manicures or watching a football game. It's really paying attention to where you are. Are there things that you need to speak to a therapist about? Or is there time that you just need to connect with your friends and say, I'm getting a sitter, we're just going to go and have some adult interactions. Those are important.
Let's dig into that a little bit more then. With that self-care, mindfulness, what are some specific strategies? We've already touched a little bit on some specific strategies or practices that we can do to cultivate that self-care, that mindfulness.
Yeah, so one of the things that is important to think about, I should have said this at the last time, is Marty talked about just kind of what happens in stress. One of the things that we fall into is autopilot. When our plates are too full, we just go through the motions because we know the motion is there. So a really good strategy that you can use is something that you just kind of call pause and scan throughout the day. Can you just pause and internally just pay attention? What feelings are there? What thoughts are there? And you just notice it. A good acronym for that is called ACE, where as you pause, you acknowledge what's around you, the positive, the painful. Then you come back to your body in some kind of grounding exercise. I mean, it's easy as pressing your hands together because you're in your body, and in your body you can do what's safe. And then E is engage the present moment. You do what matters, not based on emotion, not based on autopilot, but right now the most essential thing to do is look my child in the eye and tell them how proud I am of them. Or right now the most important thing is to take 5 minutes and just go, like Marty said, for a walk. Or to, even if it's just to do the dishes, because the dishes have been sitting there for several days if you live in my house. So that pause and scan is very good. You can also pay attention, really do pay attention to that awareness piece. What shows up in you when someone cuts you off in traffic? That's a good thing. This is where my bandwidth is. How patient am I? Do I notice that I'm snapping or doing things that are out of character? And then slowly pay attention. What's my sleep like? What's my physical activity or my diet like? Am I moving too fast? At any time that it's appropriate, I can teach you a really quick mindfulness exercise that's actually a really good one. You just let me know, Sarah, when it fits in.
Well, you brought it up. Let's do it now.
All right. So compassion. We're talking about compassion. And I want you to think about your hands. Take a minute to think about your hand, and as you do, just tell it to us. What are some of the kind and loving things that hands do? We can give a back rub. That's right. What else? A hug, yes, you can wrap your arms around someone. Hands can pull someone up when they're down. A handshake is a sign of friendship and respect. Hands are very kind and loving. So I want you to think, if you hold out your hand with me, of all the kind and loving things that hands do. And now I want you to take a moment to think about where stress shows up in your body. okay? Because when we're anxious or stressed, the first thing we want to do is create space between ourselves and the stressor. There's some avoidance that comes in. So as you think about everything with the kind hand, I want you to place it where stress shows up in your body. For me, my chest gets really tight and my heart beats really fast. So I find myself putting my hand right here. And feel the warmth of the kind hand. You can even put the other hand here as if you're giving yourself a hug. But instead of pulling away from your distress, I want you to lean into it. And as you lean into the kind hand, I just want you to breathe. Breathe from your diaphragm. Breathe in. Even more slowly, breathe out. Just keep breathing and focus on your breath and the warmth of that kind hand over your stress. I even imagine kind of having like a tire pump or something punctured into that tight knot. And as you breathe in, it expands just a little bit. And then breathe out. And just be curious and notice what happens. You don't have to force change. Just be present with your stress and your kind hand. Breathing in and breathing out. And take a moment to breathe as much as you need to. And then slowly, when you feel like that feeling has shifted and changed, you can go ahead and open your eyes. This is a good way to pause and scan. This is a great way when you're in the middle of a meeting or with your child and it's stressful, that it doesn't call a lot of attention to yourself, but you can just sit and lean into the moment and then pay attention to what message your stress may have for you.
Thank you so much. That was good.
I mean, I think that's fantastic. Really, the only thing I would add to that is specifically for each one of you, make it practical to you. You know your day. You know what hits you. You know where those things are. But be intentional for yourself in what that looks like. There are things, learned this a couple of years ago. I had a college roommate that used to stretch before he went to bed. I just thought he was a knucklehead for doing that. I was like, what are you doing? It wasn't overly stressful. It wasn't a big, hard stretch. It was just a calm, relaxing stretch. But that dude slept so good all the time. And I just never really picked up on it until about 3 years ago. I was talking about something, reading something. And so there are times, I mean, I'm old. I'm not limber anymore. Can't hardly move. But I'll just lay on the floor. Just lay down, stretch out on the floor for about 2 or 3 minutes and just kind of go, okay. It's the slow down, it's the pause and scan, it's the really being aware of the what's impacting you, what's hitting you. So the only thing I'd add to that is make it practical for you. Whatever those things are in your life, you know your rhythm, you know what that looks like. Be intentional for you. If I was going to do self-care, I'm not an artist. I can't play an instrument. So if someone said to me, hey, why don't you pick up guitar and try to relax with that? I would break the guitar over the back door within 12 minutes. That's not relaxing for me. For me, it's going to be something like turn some music on, go for a walk. I'm going to shut everything down. Honestly, I love sitting out on my back porch, just being there looking out. Things like that. Just make it intentional for you.
It made me think of something. I'm going to go a little off our question script. What role does technology play in all of this, and what can we do to be mindful of our tech use?
I think it plays a huge role. It's everywhere. I mean, there's not, probably since we've been sitting here, every phone in here has buzzed, dinged, announced something, whether it's something new that popped up on Instagram, somebody's texting. I'm just saying that, and I just felt a buzz on my watch, so I have no idea what that is. But it's everywhere, and it's affecting everything. And then especially for our kids, what they're seeing day in and day out is what they got to go do. What that one's doing, so I need to be doing this or doing this or doing this. And all that's doing is ramping up and escalating the stress level in them. then it's going to put the pressure on us to go, wait, how do I meet that need? What do I do? And so again, to me, we've got to balance it out with, it's not a bad thing, but where are the boundaries in it? What's the rhythm? And truthfully, what can they handle? My oldest daughter hated all things social media, hated all things phone. She was one, if I was going to punish her and take her phone, she's like, thank you. My middle one, if I was like, give me the phone, the sky just dropped and she was like, you don't get it. Life just ended. I'm like, seriously, it's 12 minutes. You're going to be fine. But again, just kind of helping them regulate it so that we can be regulated as well. It's a great thing. It keeps us connected. It helps us engage. But it also produces this stress of keeping up with, trying to outdo, live up to. Is this enough? And really that deeper question, am I enough? And for those of you who have middle school to high school kids, that's the time frame you're living in. That's what they're comparing every day to is, who am I? Where do I fit? And is it good enough? And most of the comparison is based on what someone else just said online.
And this isn't a discussion on internet safety. However, it also gives people access to your children 24/7. So what are they asking for? What are they daring them to do? And as parents, we can't put too much stress on that, but we can encourage times to unplug. So we know that we can unplug. Our phones kept in the kitchen or living room so they're not in their bedrooms overnight, so they don't have to worry about messages coming in. Are we talking about the stressors that they feel or things that people say? People are so critical sometimes because they're behind a screen and they're not face to face. So technology is a gift and it's a curse. I take it back. It's neither good or bad, but we just have to decide as parents what we're going to do with it.
Janelle, you mentioned before the co-regulation, so let's go into that a little bit. How specifically does the self-compassion work that we do for ourselves influence our relationship with our kids and the overall family dynamic?
Absolutely. Compassion for self, there's been lots of research on it. The more that we can cultivate compassion for self, the more we reduce shame and self-criticism, and so it increases our mental health. And one thing we know when working with very young children, and actually it's a principle for everyone, is that people will tend to repeat what we call their attention to. So as children, if you're constantly pointing out to stop that, why do you do that, what's going on? Subconsciously they fuse to that and they repeat those behaviors. Yet if we can say, oh man, you did such a great job using gentle hands, people want to give hugs and be your friend. When you do that, they tend to remember and repeat that. So the same thing for us as adults with self-compassion. Are we talking to ourselves in similar ways? Or if difficult thoughts come up, self-deprecating ones, because they do. We're not going to live in Disneyland with everything is beautiful and animals sing and come to us. If we have a particularly different thought, can we hold it and look at it? And honestly, can we say, if we were to go to a court of law, is there enough evidence to find us guilty for whatever it is? That I'm inadequate, that I need to be 30 pounds lighter. And if we can learn to challenge those thoughts and increase our compassion, we'll be able to then pour that into the people around us, especially our children. So if we can co-regulate instead of co-escalate, we can upload our calm so that we can download it into the people that matter most. Does that kind of answer your question?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And I think it's interesting because for all of us, we need to practice that. And in there then, what you're saying, we've got research studies galore that show the brain is wired to go negative 75% of the time. Saw another study recently that showed that on average, we have 10 times the conversations in our head that we have externally in a given day. So do the math. If you have just say there's 10 of these, that's 100 internally. 75 of those are negative, 25 are positive. It doesn't take a math major to figure out that's not balanced. And we all know what you said about conditioning is so true. If we're being very honest, every one of us in this room, we respond to things based on what we knew previously. The way things were shown to us when we were younger, the way that we handled certain things, like you said. I do this in my practice, if you probably picked up, I talk with my hands. It's just part of the natural outflow of how I communicate. But what happens if somewhere back in the day, someone that was influential in your life talked with hands and it was a whole lot like this instead of, well, now all of a sudden you're feeling something internally you were conditioned to and we may be missing. And so we all need to be honest with ourselves about, man, what did we know? What were we conditioned to? And then let's be really clear too, okay? How many of us have been perfect so far today? Just today. I mean, it's what, 9 o'clock? Anybody? Oh, come on, somebody's been perfect today, right? Okay, so no. If we're not perfect today, and it's not even lunchtime yet, that tells me we hadn't been perfect all week, we hadn't been perfect this month, we've never done it. So why are we placing that expectation of so much pressure to do it all right all the time? I love what you said about, hey, way to go. Great job. We need to do that internally so that we have the capacity to do it externally and see the others that need it too. But if we're caught in our heads and it's all negative and I'll never be good enough, that's coming out. My kid's going to feel that. True story, my kids, y'all know them, so don't go telling them this. My youngest son graduated from PA last year. Tiffany's husband and I coached these boys when they were in 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade in basketball right over there. No joke, we left practice one day in 5th grade. We get in the car and I looked at him and said, hey, you've got to, and I saw his little face go. And man, it tore me up. And I looked down, I was like, hey buddy, I'm sorry. And he goes, hey, I don't mind you coaching me when we're on the floor. Could you just be dad in the car? And I was like, oh my gosh, he's so right. I said, deal. I will coach you on the floor and we'll talk about it. Man, when we get in the car, it's going to be dad and it's going to be, dude, way to go. Great job today. Fast forward 7 years, senior in high school, poor kid misses a block in a game over here last fall, gets yanked, getting yelled at, rightfully so, he screwed up. Soon as the game was over, he came barreling towards me, put his head in my shoulder. We stood there for 5 minutes. I drove home with him and said, man, unload, whatever you need to do, go for it. He just expressed all the feelings he had. Not once did I say, you screwed up. Not once did I say, you're not enough. I was like, dude, you're under a lot of pressure, and that's a crazy game you just played. Couldn't be more proud of the effort. All of a sudden, his face went, oh, and just to relax. So we've got to be able to recognize that. What are we bringing to the table that's then influencing those around us? If we're not balanced out with it, if we're not in that space, we're going to continue the negativity, and they're going to take it in, and it's going to come out in another way.
Y'all are killing it. This is so good. I can't wait to watch the replay of all of this and really soak it in so much more. What happens when we get off track? When we find ourselves in a place where we've gotten off the self-care bandwagon, we're in a negative space. How do we get back on? How do we right things?
Well, I think what tends to happen, at least for myself, is I tend to beat myself up over it. Man, I really screwed up. I was doing better at getting up every morning and getting a little exercise in, and it's been to whatever, and I've made every excuse in the world and I haven't. So I tend to I feel guilt, I feel shame. Then I punish myself for what I'm not doing, and then typically that will start to build back up into a potentially overwhelming something, and then it's an all or nothing. I quit, I give up, I can't do it, it's never going to be enough. Or I'm the knucklehead that will, okay, I'm getting up at 4:30 and I'm going to go to the gym for 3 hours to make up for it. All that's going to do is pull a muscle because I'm old. And so that doesn't work. So back to that, what we've got to do is we got to slow down and realize, okay, we can either beat ourselves up and punish ourselves for the misstep and turn it into a failure and it's not, or we can pause long enough to go, okay, what got me there? What's been going on that I haven't gotten out of bed to exercise like I like to? And then let's apply that and start small to rebuild. If I was going to go run a marathon, I could not leave here today and go run 26.2. What I could do though is go get some running shoes and go for a 15 to 20 minute walk to start getting myself prepped and conditioned for here's the journey that I'm going to be on. So start small and build towards, and try not to guilt or shame yourself in whatever this was.
That's beautiful, and that's a really great illustration of the difference between a failure and a setback. A setback is just something that happens to all of us. Failure, well, first of all, failure is an experience. It's not a character trait. But when we feel like a failure, we tend to stop. So in those moments, you have a choice before you. You can do an away move into the feelings, or you can move towards what matters. So consider it like riding a bike, because bikes are a big thing today. When you look at the Tour de France bike riders, they're amazing. They go fast. They lean into those curves in ways that make me afraid. But if you slow down a Lance Armstrong or anyone else, what we're going to notice is that they're always out of balance. The thing is, they're making these micro adjustments every step of the way, and they keep pedaling. So when we think about setbacks like that, that's what we want to think about. Make small adjustments and keep pedaling.
Are there any books, apps, resources, anything you recommend for parents about self-compassion, mindfulness, and just maybe parenting in general?
This is your person that's going to have all the resources. Truthfully, on my way here this morning, I downloaded the Calm app just to see. My daughter's used it. I've not used any of those. There are some phenomenal resources. But she's going to be the one that has them all for her, so I'm going to turn that over to you so that I don't have to say anything else about it.
The Calm app is wonderful, as is balance and different things. There are different apps on your phone. Like we said, technology is neither good nor bad. It's really how much power we give it over our lives. An app that I really like is an app called Finch. Has any of you used Finch before? You can use it for children and adults. It's a sweet little app that is very encouraging. Every day you have a burb that says something positive to you, and you can set goals. Like my goals right now are drink water, say something you're grateful for every day, and what else? There's something else. But every time you meet your goals, it gives you positive feedback, and you get little micro-pets that you can take care of. So my child uses it. A lot of children and adults in my practice really love Finch because it's really encouraging. Another great app is called How We Feel. And all the apps I'm going to give you are free. The other thing I like about Finch is that it actually has some stress SOS features to it. So if you feel suicidal, if there's self-harm, you can have some emergency resources there. There's something that can help you make it through panic attacks. So not only is it cute, it has some deep clinical resources that go with it. The apps I'll give you are free, but there will be paid versions to them. With Finch, especially for some of my kids that are more clinically depressed or have some disturbing behaviors, they can enter a lottery where people can be guardians and they can give money. And I've never had a child who has signed up for the lottery to have full access to the app be denied. So they can have access to the full resource of it there. It's really good. Another good app is called How We Feel. One thing I like about this app particularly is not just a mood tracker. It's going to give you definitions of what a mood is, because sometimes people don't know their feelings or how to describe it. And there are little TED Talks between it. What is distress tolerance? How do we deal with negative emotions? And so it's another good one if you just want on your phone to look at or want your child to look at. It's really good. I'll tell you at Arkansas Families First, we have an ongoing skills group of dialectic behavioral therapy for children and their parents. And there are 4 components, 6-week skill components that we move through. Mindfulness, distress tolerance, taking the middle road, and interpersonal effectiveness. Especially when you hit the adolescent years and the emotions just go all over the place. It's a great place to learn together and to find support. We have registration starting right now for our next 6-week group. It's led by Dr. Kyla Holmes, who is an amazing psychologist. It's something that you can take advantage of. And really, just getting out and connecting socially. So encouraging your kids if they have a passion, clubs through school, even for yourself. What do we do? There are amazing resources out there.
Fabulous. What do you two think about opening up to some questions from the audience at this point? Does anyone have any questions or anything that you'd like them to respond to? Yeah, we got one right there. Do you want the mic?
You give the example of being a coach and a dad, right? So, yeah, that's 2 different roles. But if by having a talk with my son, who just got a B in a test, in the car, right? Right after he comes back from school. Where do I make the switch? Or when do I make the switch? Okay, the B is done, what do you do next?
A great question. I think be available and engage him where he is. If he's disappointed in the B, acknowledge the disappointment. It's okay to feel that, but let's not let that define it. Let's back up from there and go, hey, man, you're frustrated by this. You're disappointed in this. Whatever it may be, acknowledge it. And then go back and let's talk through, how'd you feel like you were prepped for it? I watched you put effort in. I saw you studying. I know that you took ownership and responsibility to really build towards and do the best you could. So let's take this and let's learn from it. It happens. And not make it something that's a defining characteristic of failure, but really just acknowledge the hurt in it or the setback or the frustration, and then turn that around and apply it. And let's encourage, okay, so what do you want to do with it? For some of mine, it might be, hey, we're all good. All good here. Nothing to worry about. For others, it's like, well, no, wait, I know that I could have found a little more time here, or I know that I missed an opportunity there. Get them talking about their process in it. Then it's not going to define, the B grade isn't going to define success or failure. It's going to build an opportunity to go, okay, what do I do with this now moving forward?
I'm a semi-retired golf professional. So I'm a semi-retired golf professional and love sports psychology and things. And I would say, I would just encourage you to, build habits, have them build habits that set them up for success, which a lot of kids at PA already have. But from that point on, critique that, and a lot of it is not just the habits, it's the mindset, and it's having a positive outlook. Like you had said, 75% of thoughts in the brain are wired negatively. Well, the greats at anything focus on the positive and celebrate that, and there's momentum in that. And that's what made Saban so good at Alabama, and so on and so forth, any sport. But he was all about the process. He wasn't about the results. That's putting the cart before the horse. Like, you got to have the process to pull those results and get those results.
Yeah, no, that's great.
So I worry about stressing my daughter. I have a 3-year-old now. So I'm a stressor. OCD. And so for me, I overstress and think about every worst case scenario to the extent that sometimes I put that on her. And I'm asking her questions and instructing her, our world, our society, making sure that she's aware of her surroundings, making sure that, hey, when you go to the restroom at school, nobody's in the restroom, making sure that she knows the boundaries of anyone touching her. And so the fine line of stressing her out like I'm 3, Mom, you're giving me a lot, and knowing when too much is just too much for her to handle.
Yeah. So kudos for you for helping her to think through things, especially when we recognize in ourselves as moms the anxieties that surround us. It's a great idea to equip, and so let's find solutions. So if you ever find yourself in a place that you can't find me, where do you go? So instead of pointing out fear, point out, and I know this is a little bit not what you're talking about, so I'm deviating a little bit. Find a mom with kids and a cell phone, because no one will protect you like a mama bear. So we're not focusing on all the danger out there. We're focusing on the help. If you're lost for me in a store, go to a cashier or someone with a speaker like this, and they'll call for me, and I'll come get you. You can do things to keep yourself safe. And then just by being aware of your own stress load, one thing that's really important is when we're under stress, the brain floods itself with the stress hormones of cortisol and adrenaline. And they can co-regulate in our bodies. So I don't know if you've noticed, if you've been around a very tightly wound or highly stressed individual, that our own sense of stress kind of elevates in itself. So by paying attention to that and doing something, cortisol needs an outlet, some kind of physical reset. If you notice yourself being just kind of extra stressed, doing something to kind of bring that down. And it can be fun, especially if you have young children. You can't leave them to go do your own thing and come back, right? So, hey, let's go for a walk together. Or let's do something and give it an outlet. Another thing is sometimes we unknowingly pick up on the stress levels of our children, or our children pick up on our stress levels too, and then everyone's acting out and melting down. It's also good to pause and go, wait a minute, whose stress is this? Because if it belongs to your boss, it doesn't belong in your home. If it belongs to your kid, we know how to interact and engage and connect with them to help them feel better. And if it belongs to us, be compassionate and realize right now my brain is working really hard to protect me, even if I don't need protecting. How can I say, thank you, brain, I got this, and kind of help put it at ease.
And I would just add one thing on top of that. Give yourself freedom and permission that you love her well, that you're instructing her, you're training her, and give yourself that permission, like you were saying about the processes. We're building this in, and then trust that I love her and I'm doing what's best for her. That doesn't mean you might stop being an overthinker or overstressor, but if you can slow it down just enough in that moment to go, but what do I know to be true about this moment? I've loved her well, I've tried to encourage her, and I'm going to trust that that was sufficient in that moment.
Yeah, the connection supersedes the actions. They'll remember how you made them feel.
Right, as we're nearing 9:30, how about key takeaways or summaries? What are the last things that you want our parents to walk out of here knowing, remembering?
Pay attention to your bandwidth. It's okay to clear the cache every now and then, and be kind to yourselves. Be very kind.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. It's be aware of what your capacity is. What's the bandwidth? You only have 100% of yourself that you can give. Over the course of the day, that's it. You only have so much that you can give. You can't give more than it. It's not possible. So give yourself permission to be aware enough of, what do I have on my plate? What are those things that are in front of me that it's calling for? Be aware enough to recognize, what's the pace that I'm running, and is it sustainable? And in there then, try to regulate that and be aware of, and really give yourself permission. Hey, it's okay to take 10 minutes. It's okay to exhale. Because if I can do that, that version of me is going to be that much better for whoever's in front of me next.
Ooh, and I love that. Super quick. 100% is the jar that you pour from into all these little cups. Me, work, my child. It's not that every cup is filled to the top. 100% is when that pitcher's empty. It is good. You don't have to fill everything to the top.
What an amazing amount of insight and advice in such a short amount of time. We sincerely appreciate the two of you. We appreciate everyone being here. And please note too that as your school counselors, we are always here for your children and your family. So don't hesitate to reach out to any one of us if we can help you in any way. So again, thanks. Let's give our thanks to Please make sure you sign in at the front table so we can have record of your attendance here. Please share this information and hopefully it was valuable to you, and share that with your friends. Let them know we did record this. We will be sharing it out to everyone. And the next time we do something like this, bring someone with you. We had a wonderful attendance today. We'd love to see it doubled next time. So thank you. Grab some scones. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. And happy Halloween. Thank you.